On May 20th, 2026, something strange appeared in the sky near the Ukrainian front line. Not a missile, not a jet, a balloon. An ordinary helium balloon, the kind you'd picture at a child's birthday party. But dangling beneath it was a kamikaze drone. The balloon hauled that drone up past 8,000 meters higher than the summit of Everest, and then it let go. The drone glided 42 kilometers in total silence, its engine dead, nearly invisible to every radar watching for it. And Ukraine claims this trick can push the reach of its strikes from 150 kilometers all the way to 300, driving deep into the Russian rear. A balloon. Technology so primitive it feels like something out of the age of Napoleon. And yet it is making the most expensive air defense systems on the planet, the ones worth billions of dollars, almost useless. So here is the question. How can something this cheap defeat something this expensive? And why is this only the opening chapter of a story that stretches back 81 years? For nearly 3 years of war, Russia has built one of the densest air defense networks on Earth. S-400 batteries. Pantsir systems, layer upon layer of overlapping radar, all of it advertised as a wall of steel that can shoot down anything that flies. And it is sold around the world for billions. And then Ukraine walks up not with some secret $100 million superweapon, but with an inflatable balloon and a drone that costs about as much as a motorcycle. But to understand why this balloon is so dangerous, you need to know a secret that Ukraine is not saying out loud. The idea of hanging a weapon under a balloon is not new. It has been tried before, 81 years ago. And that time it ended with 6 people dead on American soil. So why is a thing that failed so catastrophically now giving the entire Russian military a headache? Let us start with that moment itself, because the mechanism is almost beautiful in how simple it is. The drone is called the Hornet. It gets clipped to a helium balloon and the balloon just rises, carrying the drone with it, up past 8,000 meters. At that altitude, the air is thin, it is cold, and most importantly, the drone burns almost no energy at all. The Ukrainians say that during the entire balloon-carried phase, the drone uses just 5% of its battery. 5%. Then, at the chosen moment, the release mechanism lets go. The drone drops for a beat, spreads its wings, and begins to glide. No engine needed. It turns its own altitude into distance traveled forward. In that test, it glided 42 kilometers on inertia and gravity alone. And here is the clever part. This method stacks 3 things together. First, the distance the balloon itself has already drifted before it releases the drone completely free, not a drop of battery spent. Second, the energy stored in altitude. When you are above 8,000 meters, every meter you fall is a meter you fly forward. Third, the entire battery is held in reserve for the final leg the moment the drone needs to dive onto its target. Add all 3 together, and the Ukrainians say the strike range can double from 150 to 300 kilometers. And if that is true, then almost nowhere in the Russian rear is safe anymore. Ammunition depots, airfields, command centers, supply lines, all of it falls within reach. But the thing that truly leaves the Russian air defense network helpless is not just the range. It is the silence. Both the balloon and the gliding drone have a tiny radar cross-section, nearly invisible on a radar screen. And because the engine is off, they give off almost no heat, so heat-seeking missiles have nothing to lock onto either. You cannot shoot what you cannot see. A balloon drifting silently, a drone gliding silently, and below them, radar arrays worth hundreds of millions of dollars groping around in vain. So who builds this tiny monster? Here is where the story turns in a direction few channels ever cover. The Hornet is not the product of some aging defense conglomerate. It comes from an American company called Perennial Autonomy, but that is already the 4th name. Before that, it was called Swiftbeat. Before that, White Stork. And all of it ran under a project codenamed Project Eagle. 4 names for one company that alone is strange. But it is the man behind it who will make you sit up straight. Eric Schmidt. Yes, the former chief executive of Google. The company was founded in 2023, operating through an Estonian parent company called Volia Robotics, with its headquarters in Menlo Park, California. Its team is made up of engineers who used to work for Tesla, for Apple, for Google. Even Sebastian Thrun, a co-founder of Google's Secretive X Lab and the father of the self-driving car project, is connected to it. The same minds that once taught cars to drive themselves are now teaching drones to find and destroy a target on their own. This is quite literally Silicon Valley stepping straight into the trenches. And the price? This is the part that sends a chill down Russia's spine. A single Hornet costs only about $5,000 to $5,700. There are smaller models in the same ecosystem that go as low as $400. It does not rely on GPS satellite signals, the thing Russia is so good at jamming. Instead, it uses artificial intelligence computer vision to see its target through a camera and track it on its own. No matter how hard you jam it, it does not get lost because it is not listening to a satellite. It is seeing with its eyes like a real Hornet. And the company supplies Ukraine essentially at cost. In July 2025, they signed directly with Ukraine's Ministry of Defense at an event in Denmark, with President Zelensky himself present, committing to produce hundreds of thousands of units. But right here, I need to drop a question, and I want you to pin it in your mind until the end of this video. That staggering number, 300 kilometers, not everyone believes it. No official agency has confirmed it. It is a claim, and like every claim in wartime, it could be the truth, or it could be a move on the board. So what is the real number? Hold that question, and there is a bigger secret one that stretches across 81 years that I promise to tell you, because it is the key to this entire story. But first, let us talk about Russia's reaction. Because when something this cheap starts punching through your billion-dollar shield, what do? The Russians had an idea. They captured a Hornet. They cut it open, and what they found inside left them stunned. In early 2026, Russian forces seized a nearly intact Hornet. With any conventional weapon, this would be a gift. You take it apart, you copy it, you build your own version. The Russians are very good at this. They have been reverse engineering Western hardware for decades. And yes, they reverse engineered the Hornet's airframe, saw every screw, every circuit board. But then they hit a wall, because the Hornet's secret is not in the hardware. Its airframe, frankly, is simple and cheap, and that is exactly what makes it cheap. The real value is in the software and the artificial intelligence that teaches it how to see how to pick out a supply truck among the trees, how to keep tracking when every satellite signal is being strangled. And that software is proprietary. It is not sitting on the drone for you to copy. Russia captured the body, but the soul was not there. They held a gun in their hands with no bullet that knew how to aim itself. This is maybe the most bitter irony of this entire drone war. You can hold your enemy's weapon in your hands and still not have the thing that makes it powerful. In the old world, a weapon was its metal. You captured the metal, you owned the weapon. In this new world, the metal is almost an afterthought, a cheap disposable shell wrapped around a piece of code. And that code can be rewritten and improved overnight from an office on the other side of the planet. And what about America? Here is the detail that makes Russia even more uncomfortable. In early May 2026, American troops, specifically the 2nd Cavalry Regiment, trained launching this very Hornet at a range in Lithuania. An idea born in the trenches of Ukraine out of the scarcity and the ingenuity of a people fighting to survive is now being learned by the most powerful army in the world. Normally, technology flows from the Pentagon down to its allies. This time, the flow runs backward. Ukraine is no longer just a recipient of aid. It is becoming the war laboratory of the entire West. And part of what the Pentagon is paying attention to is speed. A traditional weapons program takes a decade to move from concept to the field. This one went from a workshop idea to the front line in a matter of months, and it is being refined with every single mission flown. But now let us come back to the question I told you to pin down. The number 300 kilometers. This is the moment we pull it apart. When independent experts sat down and did the math, soberly adding the balloon's distance, plus the energy from altitude, plus the battery held in reserve, the number they came up with was not 300. It was somewhere around 190 to 200 kilometers. Still an enormous leap over 150, but not 300. So why does Ukraine say 300? It could be optimism stacking every ideal condition on top of one another. But it could also be, and here is the interesting part, a piece of the war itself. Because if you are a Russian commander and you hear the enemy can strike 300 kilometers out, you are forced to move your ammunition depots, your airfields, everything farther back at greater cost, even if the real number is only 200. Sometimes an exaggerated number is its own kind of weapon. And if you are still hooked at this point, hit subscribe to War Grid Decoded, because stories like this where a balloon rewrites the rules of an entire war are exactly what we live to tell. All right, back to it. Because now we reach the first twist, and it has everything to do with the very footage that made the whole world gasp. You remember those images of the balloon dropping the drone that went viral across social media? The clip that left even Russian military bloggers stunned. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Part of that footage is not entirely real. It was created in part using artificial intelligence. That is right, the very AI technology that makes the drone powerful was also used to manufacture the images of it. This does not mean the event did not happen. The evidence for the balloon drop tests is real. But that gorgeous movie-like clip that everyone shared was polished by AI to look more dramatic. And think about what that tells you. In this war, Ukraine is not just winning in the sky with drones. It is also winning inside your mind with images. It makes the whole world believe in its strength sometimes before that strength has even fully taken shape. That is a kind of psychological blow that money cannot buy. And more importantly, the story of a balloon weapon being hyped up and then shattering, it turns out, is nothing new. It has happened before. 81 years ago. That time, too, people believed in a miraculous balloon weapon. And that time, it ended in blood. The winter of 1944. Japan is losing the Second World War, desperately searching for a way to strike the American mainland directly to take revenge for the bombing raids flattening its cities. And it dreams up something both insane and brilliant. Dropping bombs by balloon. The project was called Fugo. The idea was this. High in the sky over the Pacific runs a rushing river of air called the jet stream, a powerful current that blows from west to east from Japan, straight toward North America. The Japanese realized that if they released bomb-carrying balloons into that jet stream at around 10,000 meters, the wind would do the rest. It would carry those bombs across the entire Pacific over thousands of kilometers of ocean to fall on American soil. And they actually did it. The Japanese built around 9,000 of these balloons. But listen to how they made them, because it is both poetic and heartbreaking. These balloons were made of paper pressed from the bark of mulberry trees, glued together with a paste cooked from potato starch. And the people who made them, for the most part, were Japanese schoolgirls, young women sitting in requisitioned workshops and theaters, meticulously gluing each sheet of paper into giant spheres, many of them with no idea they were building weapons. Each balloon had an ingenious valve system. Climb too high and it vented gas, sink too low and it dropped sandbags to rise again. Like that, it adjusted itself to ride the jet stream across a 3-day journey over the sea. For the technology of 1944, this was a staggering feat of engineering. And it worked to a degree. This was officially the first weapon in human history with intercontinental range. Before ballistic missiles even existed, it was the paper balloons of Japanese schoolgirls that first carried war across an entire ocean. Hundreds of them actually reached North America. People found their fragments everywhere from Alaska all the way down to Mexico. And American authorities were quietly terrified. Not of the explosions themselves, which were small, but of what those balloons might carry next. Incendiary devices that could set the Pacific Northwest forests ablaze in the dry season. or worse, biological agents, the threat on paper was far larger than the damage on the ground, and that fear shaped everything that came next. But then came May 5th, 1945, at a place called Bly in the state of Oregon. A pastor named Archie Mitchell brought his pregnant wife Elsie and 5 children from the church group on a picnic in the woods. While Archie was still parking the car, Elsie and the children spotted a strange object lying on the ground. They gathered around it, curious. It was an unexploded Fugo balloon, and when someone touched it, the bomb went off. Elsie Mitchell and all 5 children died on the spot. 6 people, a pregnant woman and 5 children. They were the only people killed by enemy action on the American mainland during the entire Second World War. And here is the most important thing, the heart of the whole story. The Fugo campaign was a military failure. Why? For a single reason, simple and fatal. It could not aim. The Japanese released those bombs into the wind, and then they prayed. They could not steer them. They could not aim at anything. A balloon, once it left their hands, was handed over completely to the jet stream falling wherever the wind willed an empty forest, a mountainside, the surface of the sea. Out of 9,000, only a tiny handful reached anywhere with people. It was a blind weapon, an arrow fired into the dark. And the Americans were even smarter. They ordered a blackout sealing off all news of the balloons so that Japan would never know whether its weapon was reaching its targets at all. Seeing no results, the Japanese concluded the campaign was useless, and by April 1945, they stopped. The first intercontinental weapon in history died young, not because it was weak, but because it was blind. And now the biggest twist of all. Remember that secret I promised you, the one stretching across 81 years. This is it. The reason Fugo failed, that it was blind, that it could not aim, is exactly the gap that Ukraine just patched in 2026. The same core idea. Hang a weapon under a balloon, take it up high, let altitude and wind do the heaviest work. The Japanese in 1944 and the Ukrainians in 2026 are playing the same game of chess. The only difference, but the difference that changes everything, is captured in 2 words: artificial intelligence. Japan's bomb left the balloon and fell blindly with the wind. Ukraine's drone leaves the balloon and opens its eyes. It sees, it identifies its target, it steers itself and dives onto exactly what it needs to destroy. The thing that killed Fugo blindness has been erased by an artificial eye. Ukraine did not invent the balloon weapon. It just did what no one managed to do for an entire century. It gave it eyes. But that still is not the final twist. Because our central question is this: how can something this cheap defeat, something this expensive? And here is the real answer, the answer that I think even a lot of people have not said out loud. This tactic does not destroy Russian air defense. It makes Russian air defense economically meaningless. Those are 2 completely different things, and that difference is the genius of it. Let us do the math. A Hornet drone costs $5,000. A helium balloon costs a few thousand more. Now, if Russia wants to shoot it down, what do they have to use? A missile from an S-400 system. And a single long-range S-400 interceptor can cost between $2 and $4 million. You are using a missile worth millions to shoot down something worth a few thousand. Every time Russia opens fire, it wins the battle but loses the war of numbers. And think about what that does over months. Russia cannot simply ignore these balloons because sooner or later, one will get through to something that matters: an ammunition dump, a fuel depot, a parked aircraft. But it also cannot afford to answer every one of them with a multi-million-dollar interceptor. Every shot drains a magazine that took months to build and a defense budget that is already stretched thin. The balloon does not even have to hit anything to win. It just has to keep coming. And you might say, fine, then Russia should just use a cheaper missile. They can try. But the math never tilts in their favor. And worse, they usually cannot even see the thing to shoot at it. The balloon is silent, the drone's engine is off, both nearly invisible. Fire and you lose money. Do not fire and you let the drone through. Search and you cannot find it. It is a trap with no way out. And if you think this losing math is Russia's problem alone, think back to February 2023. A Chinese surveillance balloon drifted across American skies. And to shoot it down, the #1 superpower in the world had to send up a stealth F-22 fighter to fire a Sidewinder missile worth around $439,000. After that, shooting down a few more flying objects over North America, the total cost passed $2 million to bring down balloons, some of which were worth a few dozen dollars. You see the pattern now. The wind always pushes the cost onto the expensive side. In 2023, it was America itself that paid that price to shoot down a cheap balloon. In 2026, Ukraine flips the board, becoming the side that uses a cheap balloon to drain its enemy's wallet dry. Let us go back to the image at the start of this video. A balloon. Technology that seems to belong to a birthday party or to a battlefield from the age of Napoleon. And yet it is forcing an entire military empire to recalculate every dollar. This is a story about a truth that every modern war is slowly being forced to admit. In the age of cheap drones and artificial intelligence, billion-dollar machines are no longer king. A smart, resourceful people with their back against the wall can use a balloon and a few lines of software code to turn an opponent's entire defense fortune into a burden. The Japanese of old had the idea but lacked the eyes. Ukraine today has both, and that is why a balloon in May of 2026 became one of the most frightening things in the skies of war. But I will leave you with one final question, which is also the inherent weakness that even Ukraine has not solved. A balloon depends on the wind. It flies whichever way the wind blows. So what happens on the day the wind shifts? On the day those balloons, instead of drifting toward the Russian rear, get blown back toward Ukraine. The thing that killed Fugo, the uncertainty of the wind, could it come back to haunt the very people who just brought it back to life? Let me know what you think in the comments.